As is often my wont, I am out once again near a body of water. This one is Moor Green Reservoir near Underwood. Have you ever heard of the expression, free beer tomorrow? Imagine a pub had a sign outside that said, free beer tomorrow. And the individual kept going in and saying, well, where's my free beer? It says on the sign outside, free beer tomorrow. And of course the landlord would simply say, yeah, it says free beer tomorrow. And of course, tomorrow never arrives. Yesterday can never be recaptured. Tomorrow never arrives. That's the joke. And I do wonder sometimes whether, a lot of the time people who are offering false hope and are offering some kind of redemption from the all-encompassing legal system, the all-encompassing financial systems, and all the religions that I spoke about last week. I do wonder if what they're offering is the equivalent to that joke, the sign outside the pub that says free beer tomorrow. Because invariably, promises that are made never materialise. They are always around the corner. They're always on the horizon. They're always going to arrive tomorrow, but tomorrow never comes. It's a great cosmic joke in a way. But people are desperate to escape from the various binds in which they find themselves, which they get tied up in. As I opine on many, many occasions, and how many dozens of articles I've written in support of this, the greatest bind of the mind is the financial system, which is riddled at every level with fraud. But the simplest way to look at it is that we have no lawful money. We have no money that is backed by anything other than the promise to pay, and that the financial system is really all about balancing the books, about settling and closing accounts, discharging debts. But how can you discharge a debt when there is no lawful money? In theory, you should be able to tender a promissory note, or you should be able to settle the balance in accord with using the same species of currency, if you like, with which the purported debt was created. Essentially, it's all a promise to pay. It's all a promise to pay at some time in the future, a future that never comes. So it is effectively just like the pub sign, free beer tomorrow, but tomorrow never coming. And I'm chuckling now, but it is demonstrably a system of financial enslavement, because were it an honest system, were it not riddled with fraud, then the tendering of a promissory note to settle and close, for instance, a mortgage account would work. If there was such a thing as honest bankers, or indeed bankers who knew anything about the financial system that they are ensconced within, then these debts could be easily discharged. And you'll say, well, it's the legal system, it's the trap wherein the individual mistakenly believes that he's the all-capitalised name. Notice, capitalised. And then when you realise that the entirety of the financial system is basically operating in bankruptcy, because these so-called debts that are owed to the Crown House of Rothschild and all its acolytes have resulted in said House of Rothschild having a lien or a charge over all the property which is secured by the all-capitalised name. And you might say, well, what is the remedy? Is there any remedy? I don't know. I can't certainly promise you a remedy. I suppose your greatest gift is your non-compliance, your ability to say no, or to ask for proof, material evidence that anything is actually owed, and that a debt can actually be paid. Because a debt cannot be paid. We're simply passing around IOUs. Even if you're paying cash, you're just passing around IOUs. Promises to pay at a time in the future that never arrives. And it's frustrating. Very, very frustrating when you know. And you could say, well, is it better to be ignorant? Is it not the case that an individual who has worked it all out, that has a modicum of intelligence, is constantly going to be suffering in such a system? Because he knows it's all bullshit. And he knows that everyone's full of nonsense. Yet he has to exist within that system. And that such knowledge can indeed make a man miserable, because it's like being faced with a conspiracy that is so vast and all-encompassing you can't quite believe it, but when you do grasp it, it's going to be somewhat deflating for you to acknowledge that. Some people will say, and I think it is a good analogy, some people will say, well, what you've got to do is to realise who you truly are. In other words, you've got to know thyself. And you have to know, in your noggin, in your heart, in your soul, if you like, you have to know that you are not the legal fiction, and that persons, personas, are not to be respected. I think that's in the Bible, because it's all a trap, a bind for the mind. I suppose the way out is the way in. Anyway, let's just get back to this analogy of it being like a monopoly board, of every aspect of commerce, and your participation in that world, which is largely unavoidable, is effectively like a monopoly board. But the trick is to get you to believe that you are the top hat, the Scotty dog, or the old iron on the board, the token, the piece, rather than understand or cognise that you are truly not on the board at all. It's just your legal fiction. And then you might say, well, does that player, that piece on the board, belong to me? Is it truly my piece that I'm moving around? And then we've got the die. It's all settled at the roll of a die, so there's a lot of chance to it. But you could say, who owns the board? Who controls the board? And then we'd probably reason that it's the Crown House of Rothschild, because ultimately in a game of Monopoly, the banker is the one that will always win. The banker is in control. He can write IOUs. If the bank runs out of money, he can literally create credit at the stroke of a pen. And that, in essence, is what the financial system is all about. But if that's the board on which we're playing, or rather the game that we are participating in, can you do anything about it? Can you play that game to win? Can you play and win a rigged game? A game in which the entirety, the board, the players, the cards, the houses, the jail, the community chest, the chance cards, all of it, the utilities, is owned by the financiers. Now at that point, and I'm not the most stupid of individuals, but you could say, well, you're pretty stupid. But I would say, well, perhaps I'm just a bit less stupid than others. So when I look at it this way, and I know that some do put forward that view, that it is a game, and once you know that you're on the board, or you're a player whose token is on the board, then you can win, you can play to win. But I'm not so sure. I don't know if the analogy holds up, really. There's a board game called Super Mario Labyrinth, which I have played on many an occasion with my two children, and we do enjoy it. But in that game, you're essentially in a maze-like structure, a labyrinth, and you have the ability to block the other players as you go around collecting these tokens. So there are dead ends. You get shunted from time to time off the board and reappear on the other side. And then to win the game, once you've collected all your tokens, you've got to get back to your starting position, your home base, if you like. And I wonder if that is a more accurate metaphor for what we're talking about here. The engagement or the trap of the legal system and the financial systems. I do find it very interesting to explore some of the suggestions that people come up with as to how you can escape the system, or how you can play the game to your advantage and claim back or recoup your stolen credits. I'm rapidly reaching the conclusion that, as Henry Ford said, only one man in a million can truly understand the financial system. Because just when you think you've understood it, something else comes into your cognition and you think, hold on a minute, have I truly understood it? Or am I being played for a fool? So when an individual is offering you the chance of commercial redemption, the chance to claw back, if you like, stolen credit, or what that individual may call as abandoned credit, it's going to appeal, because we're all very hopeful and we do enjoy a spot of opium, you know, we do like to put it in the pipe and smoke it. But ultimately, I wonder, because it seems to me that the entirety of the legal profession and the entirety of the financial system are both completely sewn up, tied down, owned, if you like, manipulated. In fact, the expression owned lock, stock and barrel comes to mind. If you have a racing horse, right, and you are putting that horse out to race at a number of venues up and down the country, all well and good, but who is the one that ultimately profits from it all? Is it not the one who owns and controls the venues? Isn't that the one that ultimately will always win? The owner of the venues. And so we're at this point in 2026 when we can see that the entirety of the geopolitical board, okay, we'll continue with this analogy of it being a board game. The chessboard, the geopolitical chessboard, if you like, is owned and controlled by these various entities, by these various cadres, if you like. I don't think there's just one cadre or cabal, but I think there are numerous operating perhaps under the same umbrella. But ultimately, as I've opined before, you know, you've got to question what kind of a mind it is that comes up with these various traps, these various systems of enslavement. And it's not just the financial and legal systems, but they are, each of them, whether we're talking about the media, the press, the television stations, the power companies, the utility companies, all forms of transportation, are controlled by the one ring, the financial ring. When you realise that, it can be a little bit dispiriting. Or can apply the adage of Jason Brescias of Archaics, who says, break free or die trying. Because ultimately, you know, even though we get sucked into all these systems of control and manipulation and avarice, we are just passing through. This is a construct that has been captured, if you like, by what some may term right now is the usual suspects. And others may say, well, you know, if you're not an anti-Zionist at this point, then you're not paying attention, because those who are behind Zionism and have been for thousands of years are the ones that are acting in a parasitic way and sucking the lifeblood and the energy from these avatars that contain our spirits. And at that point you think, well, fuck them, I'm going to rise above it, I'm going to make light of it. And on that subject, making light of the dark, remember, light always obliterates darkness. That's just a fact, that's how it is. And secondly, even though this realm may be captured, all these various systems of control are owned by the usual suspects. That doesn't mean to say they have complete control, and that you do not have autonomy and some degree of freedom. Because freedom, if it exists anywhere, exists between your ears. Freedom to speak your mind, to go where you like, to do that which you wish to do, providing you're not causing harm to anyone else, is real. And also, let us not forget that every aspect of this realm requires your consent, your agreement. And this is why the controllers go to such great lengths to try and get you to agree, to get you to comply. So I suppose when it boils down to it, it's a question of, well, are you here for the easy life? Or is there something inside you that's going to resist all of this, all of these attempts to control you. This game, lest we forget, has been going on for a very, very long time. I mean, let's be honest, it's 2026, and if there's one thing that we've learned about the puppies who are pouncing about on the geopolitical stage, whether it be Starmer, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, whoever it might be, they are essentially just puppets who are sucking at the teat of the House of Rothschild, if I may be so crude for a minute. And yet we've been warned about this. Even the fairy stories that we are told at a young age hint at this. And I've touched on it before about how, for instance, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs has a warning in there about narcissism, about psychopathy, about individuals who are not only parasitical but are seeking to kill us, seeking to poison us, seeking to murder us. And I did a analysis of the narrative of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which focused particularly on the black mirror, the Queen's reliance upon it, and how that equates with these stupid rectangles or these mobile devices that we all wander around with, and that many are glued to on a minute by minute basis. But there are plenty of other fairy stories that warn us as well, and take for instance the tale of Hansel and Gretel. Now, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the warning in that tale is of the cruelty of the women, not just the witch, but also the stepmother. And if you look at the portrayals of the witch, you'll see that she has a hooky nose, and you'll see that a lot of witches in fairy stories have the same features. The hooked nose. The witch in Hansel and Gretel is disguised as an old lady, but it soon becomes apparent to Hansel and Gretel that she actually wants to eat Hansel. She even puts him in a cage and makes it clear that she's going to fatten him up so he's more tasty. You know, as a child you think, well, that's an horrific story. And there are other stories in which the protagonists are in danger of being eaten. Jack and the Beanstalk, for instance, the giant wants to eat him. And then you look at the parallels with all these various cults down the years that have engaged in child sacrifice, the various accusations that were levelled at the Jewish populations of a number of, at least 109 countries around the world, not only about their financial frauds, which certainly fuck people off, but also about their, well, I mean, they call it blood libels, but let's be brutally frank here. Those same individuals of the Talmudic faith were being accused of kidnapping, murdering, drinking the blood of, and eating the flesh of Christian children, shall we say. I'm not saying it was entirely Christian children. And you think, well, that is insane. But in 2026, the Epstein files show us that such vampires and cannibals do exist, and they are operating in the higher echelons of the control system, of the cabal. Jess Staley, for instance, a banker, former CEO of Barclays Bank, he's one who's been allegedly preying on children. Pederasty, the predatory nature of these individuals is something that we've been warned about by our ancestors down the years, and of course by the fairy stories. Hansel and Gretel is a macabre warning, I suppose. But another curious tale that also serves as a warning is the story of Rumpelstiltskin. Now remember, in that story, the miller boasts to the king that his daughter can weave gold from straw. The king takes her to his palace and then locks her in a room and provides a load of straw and a spinning wheel, and demands that she turn it all into gold. But who comes along Well, he's a strange little character with a hooked nose, spindly legs, and possibly a bit of a hunchback. And he promises that he will perform the trick. In other words, he will create wealth out of nothing. He will weave the straw into gold. Well, is that not really a parable of what banks are doing? Creating credit, creating money, if you like, out of nothing. And then, of course, he repeats his trick, but then imposes conditions upon her, namely that she has to give him her child, her firstborn, and that if she can't guess his name, then the child is his to take away and do with what he wills, what he wants. The same story is true of Rapunzel. Rapunzel, of course, is offered up by her father to the witch, and the witch has always got a hooked nose. So as a child, if you're listening to these stories, it gets impressed upon your psyche that there are individuals out there who want to kidnap you and possibly kill you, and sometimes eat you. In the context of light and dark, you've got to remember that the one would not exist without the other. But ultimately, in those stories, the good wins. The light defeats the darkness. But isn't it interesting how we have these stories of wicked stepmothers, women not being as they present themselves, of hiding something, of characters who want to steal, kidnap children, who want to eat them. I mean, I'm sure you can think of other stories. Those are just three off the top of my head: Hansel and Gretel, Rumpelstiltskin, and Rapunzel, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. In that sense, these fairy stories are rather profound. And of course, we also have adult fairy stories like Dracula and Frankenstein. The vampire story. You know, as a child, you may come across vampires and you may think, wow, that is incredibly far-fetched. But in 2026, it's not far-fetched. We can see in this apocalypse that there are individuals out there who do drink the blood of children, who do engage in all kinds of macabre, grotesque and ungodly acts against children of a murderous and or sexually abusive persuasion. The world is perverted, or rather there are a lot of perverts in this world, and going by the stories of old, it's been going on since time immemorial. It's quite the place, isn't it? Who would have thought in 2026 that we'd see how the so-called elites are engaging in vampirism via adrenochrome and all manner of activities, but also cannibalism. That they eat babies, they are breeding and eating babies. However, on a positive note, it is a great apocalypse because it's all being revealed. We can see clearly exactly what is going on. And in the context of 2026, the fairy stories do fit into place and they do shine a light on the darkness. But you know, the winter comes to an end, spring does arrive, and with it there comes a light in it. And I think that's where we're at right now. And also, even from a personal point of view, when I express these things, it does help me to lighten the load, because I'm all too acutely conscious that it can be somewhat depressing to realise that you're in a construct that has been captured by those forces, those satanic forces that are in the employ of the demiurge, the false god of this realm. But there's a scene at the end of Time Bandits, Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits, in which God appears in the character of a kindly old man played by Ralph Richardson, who's wearing a three-piece tweed suit.
Come on. You mean you let all those people die? Just to test your creation.
Yes. You really are a clever boy.
Why did they have to die?
You might as well say, why do we have to have evil?
Oh, we wouldn't dream of asking a question like that, sir.
Yes, why do we have to have evil?
Ah. I think it's something to do with free will.
And he just points out to all the characters there, once evil has been defeated, he says to them, yes, all of this was created by me. You didn't really think that I was never in control of it, did you? And at that point, you have the viewer will have that aha moment, because he realises in an instant that God is in control, that this is a divine creation, and that even the evil has been created by God. So, I suppose the moral of today's tale is pay attention to the fairy stories, keep your pecker up, and remember at all times lightness defeats darkness, and of course lightness is the opposite of heaviness. So be light, tread lightly, and be light-hearted, and take the piss out of those who would be trying to control you, suppress you, and enslave you. Because ultimately, if you are a righteous individual, you've got the upper hand, and you always have. From High Rise Park and the woodland, I'd like to wish you, wherever you might be, a splendid day. Thanks for getting this far. If you've been able to pay attention thus far, it's truly appreciated. And if you want to contact me, then there are many ways to do it. You can email me via the website roguemail.org. You can send me a comment on YouTube, Rogue Mail. You can subscribe at Substack, where I can be found at MOD 800. I'm also on the limited hangout known as X, and the other limited hangout known as Facebook, and I'm on Telegram. So if you want to contact me directly, catch me on Telegram, where I have a channel now. It's called Rogue Mail Uncensored, and it's an attempt to balance out the iniquity of the suppression that I've experienced on X and on GooTube. Because remember, if you criticise those who would control you, those who seem to control every aspect of this realm, although they don't really, then you will be suppressed and you'll be targeted. So, until the next time, my friends, thank you for listening, and as ever, I'll catch you on the flip side. Cheers!